What I'll say is that the stakes are way higher. Like it's like if you're a web designer, your website has to be a certain level. If you're, if you sell a supplement, they're going to look at you and be like, do you look like an athlete? Do you look like somebody that takes their own supplements? So the challenge is being married to somebody who, my wife is super, like, she's a great gift giver. She's super thoughtful. And people around me obviously know what I do. So like the bar, like people are like, oh, of course you're a good gift giver. It's like, actually gifting isn't even my love language. Like that's the funny part. It's actually words of affirmation. I got into gifting because I saw the words of affirmation I got, and I'm an introvert. So I got people reaching out to me versus me having to be the life of the party. So, I mean, it's a challenge. I think it's the most difficult for most people. Business gifting, the bar is super low. It's like people do swag, they do the same stupid dinners and golf and whatever else. It's like business to be if you're a 5 out of 10, like you're beating everybody, because most people are -3. Most people think they're a 10 out of 10. Really, they suck at it. But in personal life, people, like, you can't cut corners. You can't outsource that. You can't, like, it's like you either listen, you're in tune, you make the energy, the effort, the follow up, all that, or you don't. And if you don't, for somebody that is thoughtful or aware, and most females, in my opinion, are way better gift givers and way more emotionally intelligent. So all that to say, like, sometimes I knock it out of the park and it's like a grand slam, and other times I freaking strike out.
Yeah. That makes sense, but you do participate, because that was one of the things that, like, I've almost run into the tension of sometimes, like, because giftology really clicked a whole bunch of things for me that I feel like I had always struggled with personally, that then, like, I was bad at it personally, so business was just like an extension of that. But then I feel like when I started applying it back down the chain, I was like, so do we skip everyone's birthdays and just do random gifts? And like, sometimes that feels good. It feels better to be the guy that's like, here's something really special for you, not on your birthday. But it does feel really weird to then be like not present on those days that it feels like everyone else is sort of piling on. So how do you handle that dynamic?
Yeah, well, I would say that that's the one caveat, is like that giftology was written as a business book. If you don't show up for your anniversary and your wife's birthday or husband's birthday, Christmas, those sorts of things, like, but you're not necessarily gaining brownie points. Like, those are table stakes. It's like Valentine's Day, all the Hallmark holidays, Mother's Day, whatever else. It's like, you better show up on those days. So yes, I do them for my daughters. Like, I'm not like, honey, I'm only going to take care of you, on a random Tuesday.
Yeah.
But like this is really, it's a business strategy. So but the personalization and thoughtfulness and including the inner circle and a lot of the principles still apply, but to skip the table stakes token holidays, personally, I think is a big mistake.
That makes sense. So business wise, it's like not necessarily a game worth playing and you just don't have to, but personally it's like, that's the other kind of table stakes where it's like you have to be there for people on the expected days, but then the question is like, how do you go over and above, maybe?
Yeah, well, you go over and above on those days, or you do something great and thoughtful, but you might, still think personally, like showing up on random Tuesdays saying, hey honey, I got you a spa package at the Four Seasons, I'm taking the 4 kids. Like, I still think that it applies, this surprise and delight. The timing still can matter, but it's there are ebbs and flows, and there's always anomalies, right? Like, any of the rules I give, like I'm like, don't give consumables. Like, that's the worst gift on the planet. And, you don't know people's diets, or you get one impression from it, you consume it, it's gone. But there are times, like where food works. But 99% of the time, I don't do food because I want to give something to somebody as an artifact and have them use it once a day for the next 10 years. That's 3,600 impressions, top of mind, referral top opportunities. So, but there always is the caveat. And so, like, having that emotional intelligence to be able to flow and adjust there. But here's the guardrails. Here's the system. Here's the process. 99% of the time, this is the playbook. But there's always going to be anomalies.
Right. The consumables thing was such I don't know, just a click moment for me. But I feel like something that I have been considering, which I would love your thoughts on, is like, how do experiences fit into that? Because experiences can be like a one and done thing, but a memory is also an artifact that you can go back to. So they seem to be like, how do you think about that in the framework? Yeah.
So people ask all the time, what's better, an experience or a physical gift? And I'm like, it's not either or, it's both. It's like, but most people do their experiences as like the same dinner at Morton's, or it's the same seats or suite at a ball game. It's like, it's not once in a lifetime. It's not like, oh my gosh, I've never been to a ball game before a dinner. But if you take somebody on a trip to Africa and swim with sharks and do crazy once in a lifetime things, that's amazing. Go,
right.
I encourage people to do that with their clients, with their employees, with their vendors, with their partners, investors. But the cool thing is if you give a world-class artifact, every time they use the thing or the things, that triggers, because we're all visual as a human, we're wired, whether we believe in a God or not, we're wired to be visual, tangible, like we're tribal, like you get something in your hand. That's why when you go to a Chick-fil-A or wherever, you point to the picture because we're visual. So you use the physical thing, whether it's a knife, a $2,000 mug, whatever the crazy things are. Every time you use it subconsciously, you're reminded of that once in a lifetime experience in that relationship.
Right.
So the best is do both at a level 10. Most people, I would say there's way more people that do their experiences at a level 10. Like when they're not taking people to the Motel 6 or taking them to the Four Seasons or whatever else. Like they're doing it at a higher level. But then it's like they'll drop 10 grand on the experience or 5 grand or a grand or whatever. And then it's like $75 polo or jacket or a cooler. It's like they're not congruent.
Right.
And people are like, oh, gifting and stuff doesn't work. I'm like, no, you're giving stupid swag thinking it's a gift. That's not a gift. If slap your logo on something and give it to somebody that's affluent or can afford nice things, you're actually manipulating. You actually just devalued the relationship and didn't even realize it. And so experiences, physical artifacts, I love both of them, but just you could do way more for way fewer people and do it at a world-class level.
Right. Well, and I think something that has really stood out to me in that, even in the context of, me coming from like a video and photo media background, is this idea that the experience, it's to this idea of getting a handwritten note, of the packaging, that the thing is important. The thing at the end of the road is important, but the way you take someone down the road is so important. And like for us on the even commercial media side, so often everyone gets so focused on like the deliverable that they lose all context for the road they're taking everyone involved down. Whether that's like your employees who are going to have to come share their experience on set, or the customers that you're asking, or the talent or the crew. And it's like, it's both. It's gotta be, there's gotta be some respect for the experience in the moment. But then when, I think the other thing that I've found in that is that when you create a really great moment or series of moments, the opportunity to then sort of tokenize that, whether that's through a physical object or the creation of some media thing or something, we invert it, that it's like, oh, I want the thing and I want to skip the path to get there. And it's like, well, if you take the path to get there, the thing sort of presents itself. And so like even I did a project recently, which was a film with my buddy's story, who it's a crazy story, but he got stabbed a few years ago. It was sort of just like this random acts of violence thing. And we were having a conversation about how the defendant was finally getting sentenced, and I sort of was like, it would be interesting to make a film about that. But my whole thing was, if we don't feel good about it, it never goes anywhere. And it changed the stakes for me, because now it was like the whole point of this is to make it a good experience for me and my buddy Dennis and my buddy Billy, who came out to help me, because this may only ever exist in our minds and nothing else comes after it. Yeah. And approaching it from that level, I think it's one of the greatest actual finished film things I've ever made. And it was like a little light switch moment for me, that I was like, man, it's so easy to put the cart before the horse with this stuff. And then like I just have to tell you, because maybe it's a twisted sense of humor, but shortly after we did that, it was Dennis's, he calls it his Celebrate Life Day or his Stab-iversary, depending on which day you ask him. And I got him a custom Benchmade knife that was engraved with his name and a quote from the video on it. And it had a sort of note about how it's our chance to show people what knives are really for, basically. And like it was a very simple gesture, but it was like just all the dots lined up, you know, where it was like, oh, I don't have to overthink this now. It's just sort of like in many ways, an obvious outworking. But when we put the experience so far down the road and just start with like, well, how do I do something cool? You know, how do I do something that's flashy? How do I get a deliverable that sells people? You end up spinning in circles forever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's not even about the stupid thing. The thing is a delivery vehicle for the emotion, like the story, the connection, the relevance, the context, what you're talking about. And so, yeah, I mean, the best movies, the best video, and it's storytelling, right? It's like we're all part of a story. We all relate with highs and lows, and so if you can show up for people and show that you put thought, attention, care into what, you know, and include their spouse or their kids or, you know, or what matters to them. Like obviously that like celebration of life, Sabbaversary, whatever, like there's very few things in his life that are going to be more like anchoring than that. And if you can tie into that and know his sense of humor or what he would appreciate or whatever else. And, you know, I do a ton with knives. I've never done that with a knife. I've never given that to somebody for their celebration of living and still being alive. But I really like it. And I mean, how many times are you going to pull out that tool, use it, think about you, and tell the story? Tell the whole thing. It's like now it's an opportunity for him to not even bring it up in a weird way. Now it's like other people are bringing it up, like, what's up with the knife? You know, like, because we all want to tell our story, right? We all want to share. And now it's a trigger. Now it's an anchor point. You know, it's a pillar. So well done, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I was proud of that one. It was we ended up getting him. There were two other people who helped on the film, and I made matching ones for everyone. So the crew people, because like Billy was there when we opened the evidence bags 3 years later of like Dennis's bloody clothes, and it's like this whole very memorable experience. But just like that little tokenization of it was so cool, which actually leads me into something that's like, so this is another thing that I've really been paying attention to in the last few years was like, I feel like there's this initial roadblock of, okay, reconnaissance. In so many of these relationships, especially on the business side, there can tend to be a lack of information. It's like, well, I don't really know these people. I don't, maybe have their addresses to send them things, or I don't know what they like, or I don't know their story. And there's this element of this to me that it feels like we're, a lot of the proper framing of a gift is showing someone what you see in them. And if you don't see them, it's hard to show them what you see in them. And so trying to get into this pattern of going, oh, I need to be better about having normal people conversations with all of these people in my lives, because when it's all on this one level, it's really hard to actually execute any of this because I don't know you really, which is a sign of me not showing up in that relationship well. But I would be curious, any of your additional thoughts on this sort of like recon type, not in a sneaky way, but I've even started randomly asking people like, oh, are you a coffee guy? Oh, you this, oh, you that. And like, you end up like picking up all these little things about people, which give you a lot of little jumping off points. But when you're just like, okay, what are we doing today? Get in, get out. It's like, well, I don't have much to actually curveball this off of right now. So how do you collect info on people?
Yeah, well, I mean, we teach our clients, because I mean, we have a done for you gifting service and agency. But if somebody can't get me the info, like we're not the ones that go do the research for the client to give to their employees or customers or whatever else. Like they need to have the relationship. That's why people are like, oh, I want to do my Dream 100 prospecting campaign with you. I'm like, no, you will. Like it's super expensive. You don't have the tenacity to gift for multiple years, because that's what's oftentimes going to take. Like you need to do more marketing. Like take care of the people that are like you already have a relationship with, and you need to ask better questions and take notes. And, like, it's like, yeah, talking about what people did over the weekend. And when they say they're going on vacation, you ask the follow-up question of like, where are you going and why are you going and who's all going? And like, you have 4 kids, or, you have, your dog's going, or your spouse, like, oh, what's their name? Like, but most people have like this checklist and they make it awkward. It's like, hey, can you just fill out this form? So it's like, you're ruining the surprise, A. B, like, people are like, what are you going to do with that? Like, it's like, it should be conversational. What I will say is, we do know with a certain amount of certainty, there are certain common hot buttons amongst humans. I mean, you mentioned the benchmark knife. I've interned with Cutco, and they're one of our biggest partners still 22 years later. People are like, really, a stupid knife thing? I'm like, well, most people eat. Most people have a kitchen. Most people are foodies or entertain or cook for their kids or host. So it's like, a lot of the things that we do center around the kitchen because it's the most universal. It's like why people go out to dinner with their friends and clients and employees or partners. It's like breaking bread is universal. So a lot of the things we do going after the common, amongst humanity. And when people try to like say, I'm going to do 50 different gifts, it's like they have good intentions and then they don't do it. Or they do a little recon. They're like, this person likes coffee. And they like send like Starbucks. Well, somebody sends me Starbucks. I don't really drink Starbucks because I actually like coffee. I own part of a coffee company. Like I like really, really good coffee. I make my own cold brew, whatever else. Like, so a lot of times you gift in their hobby and they're into golf and you send them golf shoes. They already have 5 pairs of golf shoes. So the reason we teach people like, hey, do something for their family. If they're married or have a significant other, do something for their assistant or their chief of staff or the team, the people around the people that oftentimes don't get it ever taken care of. So a lot of our things were because we come at it from such a different angle, it allows for people that don't even have that much info on somebody for us to be able to say, hey, we can take care of these 50 people or 500 people or 5,000 people. We're not going to bat 1,000. Even if you customize every single one, you're not going to bat 1,000 because you could send Ferraris to everybody and people would be like, these 3 douchebags would be like, I didn't like the yellow. I wanted a red one. So there's no like guarantees, but the goal is to try to bat, 8 out of 10 to where people are like, this is one of the most thoughtful things I've ever received in business. Once again, bar's low. You include somebody's family, you have their name, their family name, their whatever, their mission statement. Like there's ways that you can dial in and say, across humanity, here's the things that I'm going to tap into. And with a certain amount of certainty, be able to hit, 8 or 9 out of 10. And that's like, it's double Hall of Fame in baseball. So like it's, that's how we teach and execute for our clients.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I feel like one of the most undervalued resources in life probably, but especially business, is some version of earnest appreciation and generosity. And I think that's something that I feel like you've tapped into really well, is like there's a lot of things that we all spend a lot of time getting really good at. And appreciating the people who have got us to where we are is one that we don't spend enough time on. And being honestly generous is another one of those things. And I feel like one of the most obvious areas of that for me in my life has been the difficulty of verbalizing and writing appreciation, actually. And you talk a lot about handwritten notes, which is I've found to be super valuable, but was like a clunky process for me to start trying to wade into, even as someone who like has written a lot of stuff. Like, okay, how do I write someone to another person in this way? It's like uncomfortable when you're used to this very like formal interaction. And like, I don't know, for me, it was like, I feel like all my buttons started going off where it's like, to be totally honest, it's like, those high school, early 2000s, like, well, you don't want to be gay and you don't want to be this and you don't want to be overly lovey and you don't want to be manipulative and it's not quid pro quo. And you're like, I don't know what I can actually say about you. And I feel like I have gotten so much better at that. But instead of me talking about what I've learned, I would be really curious to hear your thoughts on how to write and verbalize better notes of appreciation. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that most people you can find something in that person that you appreciate, respect, admire, like, and it doesn't have to be like people think, oh, a handwritten note has to be like, 5 pages long. Like this isn't Hamilton. Like we're not in the 1800s. Like you don't have to write like, 5-page letters, but most people are coming at it from a business perspective of alluding to referrals or deals or whatever else. And so you got to get rid of that or else it's not really a note. It's it's more of like an advertisement. And that's not going to land. And so I think that if you can have one specific thing that it's like giving a compliment. Like you need to be like, it needs to be specific. It needs to be genuine. Like if you can do a couple of those things and direct that, like, and say, hey, I was just thinking about you and was just, really appreciate X and, can't wait for the next time we're going to spend time together. It doesn't have to be more than 4 or 5 lines. It's so rare. Like once again, the bar's low. You get a handwritten note. Now you take it up a notch and put it on really beautiful paper, cardstock. We use our letterheads, $9 sheets of steel. We send out thousands of these notes to people. And people are never used to getting a $9 sheet of steel. Like that's kind of unusual. So it's handwritten on a piece of steel. Like now people are like framing it and whatever else. It's like $9. $2 worth of shipping. So $11. People are like, well, that's stupid. That's a lot of money. I can go get my car stock for 10 cents. I'm like, but you'll spend $18 on a flashlight that falls apart in 18 seconds that nobody cares about because you're branding. And I'd rather spend half that, save 50%, and give a handwritten note to somebody. Because even within the gifting realm, if people want to send something, they're like, I'll just send it from Amazon. I'm like, nope, you can't hire us. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if something comes from Amazon with no note or no context, like that's where it provides the story, the meaning, the context. Why are you giving it? Otherwise, it's just a thing. They can go buy their own thing. Like so the handwritten note to us is part of the secret sauce. Like if you don't have that, then you might as well go do something else.
Yeah, totally. And I think that like, it's such a fun habit to get into because once I started doing it, it was like, and recognizing this idea of like, okay, like call out, I see you. Thank you for doing these things for me. I appreciate how you show up. These are attributes in you that I really admire. Thanks for being the best version of yourself, keep it up. It's like, oh, well, I can do that to anyone, anytime now too. That it's like, if I'm on a set and talking to crew members, it's like, whether it's the guy running lights or the guy doing sound or the people feeding people, it's like that being able to just articulate in my head how to properly appreciate people. Now it's this like free asset that I have all the time that was just wasted throughput before, because like I was appreciating people, but I wasn't recycling that out. And that just the act of beginning to do that starts to change the reality of how the people around you are showing up now that you've acknowledged seeing them. And so that's something that's like, I guess what I was curious about there is it's something to this idea of like, I see so much content online right now that's about like how to increase profits and how to do this and how to do that. And it all feels very like get focused to me. Here's how to get more. Here's how to get more. And my experience in everything that I do has been that generosity is the place all good things start. And so how do you think about the interaction of like profit and generosity in a business? Because I think that that's part of where we get into this weird quid pro quo cycle of, well, when I have profit, then I'll be generous. And I don't know that that's exactly right.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, I think first off, nobody really cares about the gifts. Like people are like, well, I'm not a gift giver. I don't care about gifts, or I don't have budget. And I'm like, do you have budget for relationships? Or do you have a biz dev, marketing, HR? Like, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, that all we're talking about is investing in humans. Like generosity is just showing up in uncommon ways for people and with no strings attached. People are like, well, then like what happens if nothing happens? And I'm like, well, first off, show me somebody that's committed to being radically generous to relationships for 3 years, play the true long game, or even longer, 5 years or 10 years. Like the people that one of the guys, Joel Marion, who's a close friend of mine, like he was generous when he was a teacher at $30,000, salary. Now he's worth like 9 figures. Like you don't become generous because you're wealthy. You become wealthy because you're generous. And usually it's like showing up for relationships, and like whether it's them or somebody that they tell, like good things just happen. That's how the world's wired. Like that's how God's wired the world. Like you don't know like the principles, like in whether you're Christian or Jewish or whatever else, like it's Old Testament stuff. Like a gift, ushers you before kings. Like people just like to be around generous people. People like to refer and make sure that somebody wins when they're generous. But people do mess up and they're like, I gave the gift, now I'm gonna ask for the referral. I'm like, then it wasn't a gift, it was a manipulation. So what I would say is if you can make it a math equation, and we talk about this in our like whole like blueprint that we take clients through, whether they're a solopreneur or a Fortune 500 company, take them through the same blueprint of talking through like, well, what did you profit last year? Because it is like nobody's running a charity. And so let's just say, you made $100,000 last year. Our blueprint says 5 to 15% of net profits reinvested back into relationships to keep them, to grow them. And eventually the secret sauce is to turn them into a sales rep for your brand. Not just like a passively loyal person, but somebody that's actively wanting to see you win. If you think about it, like 5 to 15% of 100 grand, that's 5 to 15 grand. Like it's not cheap, but it's also like you get to keep 85%. And oftentimes the people that you're loving on and appreciating, you couldn't hire them on your payroll, even if you offered them 6 figures. They would just turn you down. and you get that person out there advocating on your behalf when you're not in the room, like it's the cheapest to love on people and inspire them to want to see you win. And like, it's like one of the cheapest costs. Like almost everybody's business, whether they're big or small, they can point back to, it's less than 100 relationships. Even big companies like Google, handful of mentors, investors, advisors, bankers. Like it's usually businesses rise and fall on a small quantity of people. Technology's cool. Like I, nothing wrong with any of that stuff, but every industry, manufacturing, technology, you show me an industry that wasn't derived based upon the human to human connection. And to not like want to go pour into those relationships that allow you to even have a business, like, or a company or sales, like it's dumb. But people do it all the time. So it is rare for somebody to be radically generous and not ask for anything. But to me, like if you play the long game, I always tell people, do it for 3 years, come back. If you tell me it wasn't worth it, like I'll comp your next round of gifts. Yeah. And nobody's ever come back. Why? Because when you do it consistently, like it's things do really, really well. So to that point, if your audience, your tribe wants to download our entire playbook, everything that we teach and walk clients and charge tens of thousands of dollars, doesn't matter if it's the Cubs or small businesses, you can go to giftologyplan.com and start to think about like what that math equation is and who those people are and how frequently should you send something. And our whole playbook that we walk people through is a Giftology plan. They can go download it for free. And the cool thing is somebody that's small might only have 3 relationships to take care of. Like now they have a plan and a strategy and can be intentional with it. The challenge is if you try to do it for 30 or 300 or 3,000 people, that's where things start to get difficult. But the same blueprint is right there. Right.
Yeah. I love that, man. That's something that's like, I've always been a big sharer, and it's funny because I feel like it's almost like a cultural stigma now that it's like, oh, if you share stuff, you're like some like course creating, money grabbing vampire of a person, which is part of why we don't sell any sort of content, but I try to just like share as much as I can online. And I feel like that is an unfakeable signal that you believe in the power of what you do. And that it's like, okay, if you starting to do this, you'll get good at it. And if we're not a good fit, you deserve to be good at this anyway, right? Like this is something worth doing. And if you get good at it, see the power of it, and then decide you want to do more of it, we trust that we're the best option. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And I feel like it's rooted in some belief that they're like not the best option or something. So it's like, oh, well, we got to like paywall this. We got to hide it all. We got to do whatever else. And so it's like, that's one of the funniest things. Whenever I go and get like an ad for like, here's our, 20-step course to how to like maximize your video ROI, I always click on the profile and I'm like, these bitches give nothing for free. Like they've got to put everything they've got behind a paywall, and everyone who really is good at what they're doing that I found doesn't. You look at you look at Gary Vee, you look at anyone who's like really, really excellent, like true expertise, I feel like is an awareness that you have so much to give away and that it's not a competition, right? It's like, oh, well, you can't actually compete with us. It's not a competition, but like I wouldn't try to beat you guys at your own game. So it's like you can teach everyone all you want, Yeah.
No, Gary's, his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook was that. Like, it's not give, then ask. It's give, 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 then you earn the right to ask. Not the expectation. You can't expect people just because you gave. Otherwise, it's not a gift. If you give your gift, you give to your wife or your husband and then expect something, how does that play out? Not real well, because it wasn't a gift. You were trying to bribe or manipulate. And so, Vaynerchuk, he's a perfect example of like, he gives an insane amount away and then like occasionally says, hey, buy my wine, that's half the price, or buy my book. Like, he's at a $150,000 keynote and he turns a lot down because he's got so much inbound of people just wanting to be around him and wanting to like be in his, his sphere. It's but most people, to your point, like they're afraid. They're afraid to give away their secret sauce. Like they're afraid to give it away because they're like, well, nobody's gonna hire me. It's like, no, the best people want somebody to partner with. They want to be around those kind of people. They want to collaborate. Like I have other gifting companies that we're starting to get advisory shares gifted to us because they're like, we want you around. We like your stuff. We need your IP. We want your influence on our product. And initially when I wrote the book, I thought people would hate me in that gifting and swag space, but it turns out the exact opposite, because they're looking to collaborate. They're looking for a refreshing voice of somebody who is being generous and showing up and giving new ideas. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah. That's so what are your thoughts? Because I feel like you're in a really clever place, and I mean that in the best way possible, where it's like the nature of giftology is such that you can go like play the long game and worry less about ROI. But for people, like most of what we do is in the content space, and I feel like that's we're having the same conversation, but in a different form a lot of times with clients, because everyone wants to be to your quid pro quo thing. It's like, well, how do I do one thing that's like cheap, fast, easy, that says everything I want to say, that then is going to cause a million people who all want to give me money? And I'm like, I have bad news for you. That's not how any of this stuff works. Yeah. But that's the conversation we're having. And so how would you recommend people reframing the conversation? Because my experience has been that the best content is a gift, actually, and that when you can apply this framework of like showing people you see them, showing people you're there for them, showing people that you're doing truly thoughtful things for the world around you that aren't obviously beneficial to you, that in the long run, that's actually the best play. But that we go into this very short term, how do we get conversions mindset, and back to the dentist video at the beginning, it's like you ruin the whole experience and now none of it works. Yeah. And so how do you think about that idea of like not just in physical gifts, but in content, in advertising and marketing and whatever you do, playing the long game and showing up for people and sort of applying that giftology framework to other areas of your business? Yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting is because we're in the gifting and generosity business, like, I actually think other people are able to leverage it better than we are, because people kind of expect it. It's like I send out a gift to somebody, they kind of like in the back of their head, they have to know like that could be coming, right? And it still works, even for us, where it's like people are like kind of know our game, know our blueprint, our model. So I think that when somebody's generous and it's not their game, I think that's why Vaynerchuk has risen, in the media world and advertising, and then why because he's shown up generous and uniquely and differently. And so I think that it works even more so in industries where it's like one of my buddies, Jonathan Kaiser, wrote a book about selfless service. And he's in the commercial real estate, the most cutthroat business in the world. And he's the number one largest, fastest growing commercial real estate company in Arizona. And it won't be long, in my opinion, where he'll be across the entire country. And he goes in and serves the crap out of people over and over and over again. And because of that, he earns the trust in the business. Sometimes the business doesn't come for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Initially, when he did it, it almost tanked him. But it was like one of these things where it was like hockey stick. So, but commercial real estate is like notoriously known for nobody gives. Now, they might talk about it. And I'm sure there's other companies that are similar to Jonathan, but he's somebody who's like really like gone all in on this. And it's worked. It becomes this shining star. So I think that, to your question around like physical gifting, like really at the end of the day, all of this is love. The 5 love languages is like, you can do words of affirmation, which I send people a ton of videos. That is a gift. When you like take your time to physically do something and acknowledge somebody one-to-one with a video, or even one-to-many, if it gives them hope or a roadmap or makes them laugh, or any of those things are gifts. Handwritten note, gift. Spending time with somebody, that doesn't scale. That's a gift. Like all of these things are at the end of the day just making somebody feel loved and appreciated and seen. And so I think the more you can do that, whether it's one-to-one or one-to-many, and video is one of those beautiful things that has that ability to, be one-to-many. I think that's really, really powerful. And, it could be like, it doesn't have to be overly produced. And, you probably know, like some of the best stuff is more raw or more real. And why? Because it communicates like realness and genuineness and all the things that, like, I don't care if you live here or in Africa or Idaho, like there are all certain character traits that we all kind of admire as humans. But I think at the end of the day, like the methodology that we're talking about is loving on people and appreciating people. And that can be done a lot of different ways, but it still communicates love.
Yeah, Totally. That was one of my favorite things that we did in the last few years. Was during the pandemic, we were working with a waste and recycling client who wanted to do something that was like thank you to our employees because they're let's say like under recognized essential workers, you know, during all the whole healthcare thing. It's like these guys were also going out there every day and taking care of increased residential trash loads and all this stuff. And we had to do a quick reframe for them because totally understandably their first, I think, inclination was like, let's have like the board go on camera and say thank you. And I was like, wait. This is not about any of those people. And so we did this whole thing where we went out into all the facilities at 4 a.m. with drivers inspecting trucks and wrote this whole script about how these guys are, you know, the unsung heroes that get up and do all these things, and was like, we just need to make this about them because that's the point. And so often we want to make it about us, that it's, we're so great, we're so glad you're here, thanks for being a customer, yada, yada. And it's like, it was super impactful for them at the end of the day. And I was really grateful for it, but it was just a funny example of that. Like, it's almost the same thing that you said about the, like, putting your name on a Tiffany's vase at a wedding or something. It's like, oh, we're so thankful for you. Here's our logo, as opposed to being like, let's go into the trenches with you. And in this case, a bunch of employees who most people never see that world. You know, they see the green grass and the trash drive by, but all the actual nitty gritty of these facilities is unseen by most people. And it's like, let's come in with a cinematic approach to really respectfully demonstrate the beauty of what you do that most people don't get to see. And like, that's another moment of just like, it twists people's heartstrings because it's so under-realized. So it's like, how do we go find where you are that you don't think people see you and show you we see you? Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to be the hero in our own story, right? In the gift, that's the funny thing, is like a gift is about the recipient. Most people, I want something cool. I want something in my colors. I want my logo. I want on my time. It's our 50th anniversary. Nobody cares. Everybody cares about themselves. So whether it's video or whatever else, like it has to be about the recipient, not about the giver. Yes, the giver can provide some like, hey, I see you, I know you, whatever else. But at the end of the day, like, it has to land and say, no, that person is seen. That person feels a certain way. That person is the hero, not you. And people get it twisted and messed up, and then they wonder why nobody cares. And it's like, because you didn't make them feel a certain way. That's why. Like, you didn't connect. That's it.
Right. Well, John, I could talk to you about this all day. I want to be sensitive to your time. Do you have time for a quick speed round?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I have 8 questions. We'll get through as many as we can. I know we've got 7 minutes, and the intent is for you to answer them as quickly as you deem possible because they're slightly tricky.
Yeah, fire away.
Okay, whenever you're ready, I'll start on your signal. Network marketing tips. What is your biggest pet peeve?
People that don't have a product to sell, they just have an opportunity to sell.
What is your favorite TV show?
Right now, it is Ted Lasso, but my wife and I are watching Yellowstone.
I've heard good things about Yellowstone. I love Ted Lasso. I've not seen Yellowstone, and I will stop butting in. Can you tell the story of a specific time you showed up in an inauthentic way?
I'm sure there's lots. Be a better question for my wife.
That's probably true.
My engagement story is probably the inauthentic because I've made it all about me and what I wanted in the show and almost died for it. But it was really a engagement to show how cool I was versus making it about what she wanted. And there's still wounds and scars from that, 14 years later.
Man, I feel that. What is your favorite emoji?
It's 2: fist bump with a heart or heart with a bomb. So the heart bomb gift. So like those would be my 2 go-tos.
The love bomb emoji. I like it. What is the most common mistake you see people make with how they think about the value of relationships? I think that people in general just don't realize how long the game is. And so they're only thinking in what they can understand that human could deliver to them right now, not realizing that they might be in a position, or 5 different positions over the next 50 years, and realizing like we crossed the same bridge
many times. And so we're extremely short-sighted, myself included. As humans, like it's hard to imagine, 25 years into the future. So I think it's one thing to talk about the long game. It's another thing to actually like live that as you're building relationships.
What is your favorite dish at your favorite restaurant?
Whatever the chef makes that night at Vicia. It's like, they call it vegetable forward, but the meat is legit. The vegetables they make are like, you can't believe the taste in your mouth. And they have like a 6-course meal that's off the charts.
Where's that?
It's in St. Louis.
Okay. I'll have to go check that out sometime. That sounds awesome. Could you boil your success into one sentence?
Give more than is reasonable.
Ooh. What is your hardest learned lesson?
Everybody's not a giver.
And what is your biggest obstacle right now?
I am wearing a ton of hats personally and professionally, and trying to figure out how to show up at a level 10 in all of the father, husband, friend, sibling, business leader, community, church, like all of them. Like I feel like there's not enough of me to go around, and I oftentimes having to apologize for not being able to do it all.
That's I think, incredibly relatable answer. Well, you've made it to the end of the speed round. That was actually fast. I think that was the fastest speed round that I've seen anyone do. And we are done with 2 minutes left. So,
I mean, overachievers. You're an overachiever, Evan.
I try. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for your time. I personally got so much out of this conversation. It's great to talk to you in person after reading your books and listening to your podcasts and watching to so many things. I really appreciate you have made a measurable impact in my life and the lives of the people around me, and the work that we end up doing creatively, and even, little things like gifts for friends and family members. And so I am so grateful that you share so much of what you have learned, and that you're just making the world a more generous place, man, which I think it really needs.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.